see if anybody's around. It's 3:30, April 20th, 2025. Um, and so I was gonna go live earlier, but I just didn't. Didn't. And here I am coming to you with a little bit of the 411 and the shenanigans of the planets, of what's going on. So let's just take a quick look on what's going on out there. As above, so below. I did do a little blurb on, people are just, this is like, and then the countdown for the election. A lot of people are talking about this. A lot of people are getting really into craziness with this. Now we got the moon in Taurus. So moon in Taurus, snuggling up. No, not Taurus. Sun is in Taurus. Moon. I'm looking at the moon. I'm like, the moon's not in Taurus. The sun has gone into Taurus, so we are now officially into Taurus season. It's at 1 degrees. So we are now. So happy birthday to all my Taurans, my Taurus people. So here we got the Taurus energy there. We have the moon is just ending up in Capricorn. It's going to be snuggling up to Pluto. That's going to cause a lot of internal issues, man. People are just going to, it's something we're going to have to get used to with that, because the moon's going to be doing that at least once a month, right? And going by there. We also have Mercury's on his way going through Aries. Uh, Yeah, we got the opposition over to Pluto from Mars. That's going to be happening over the next couple days. That's really going to get people real pissy too. Because people are going to want things in a certain way. Everybody, that stubbornness is going to come in. And then we have that Aries, or that, not only the Aries energy, but the Taurus energy. And I always look at what's opposing, those planets. So we have, with Leo opposes with Aquarius, but that Taurus energy is also opposing a lot of energy coming into Scorpio. Mercury and Mars and Pluto are rulers of Scorpio. So even though that Scorpio doesn't have anything in it, there's still a lot of aspecting it, with energies coming in where Mars wants to be that fighter and wants to go out, and then we want to get into the depths of it and want to find out, what is the core, to this all? What is the value of this all, right? And this is where it's like, basically, if you're going out and vote, go vote and be done with it. It's in the powers of be that hands, and not get all up in arms with it, because that's the other thing, is that people are going to get very touchy, very upset about this all. Now, I did the other part too is the other part. I was doing some deep dives and looking into it is Easter. So doing some deep dives into Easter, and of course the Leo King sent me his sent me an email. He sent out a general email from his Substack, but he was talking about the Council of Nisa, the Council of Nice. Anyways, in 325, which was with Constantine, and Constantine was the one who wanted to unite his kingdom. That's basically it, and having to unite his kingdom. And in the council, it was basically to discuss who Jesus was and how we can, it was the first time in 325, this first time that Christians were, it was legitimizing Christianity. It was legitimizing that. But it was also where Constantine wasn't a Christian, right? Constantine, he didn't get baptized until onto his deathbed. So it's interesting, and the whole bit that he wrote about it. And sometimes if you read it, some people will get very upset because they'll think, "Oh my God, you hate Christians." And it was like, no, he just stated a lot of facts in here, historical facts on it, and the reasoning why we celebrate Easter when we celebrate it. Easter should be celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon following the spring equinox. And that's what we do. We celebrate Easter on the first full moon after the spring equinox. That's usually when it's done. Not all the I gotta say, it's sometimes it might be in around that time. Um, yeah, the calendar year is every 4 years. So anyways, but yes. Um, and also where Christianity made it very patriarchal, which is true. Which is true. When you go into Christianity and you go into the going back, a lot of books that were written by women, and a lot of the women in the first part of the church and evangelizing and were women, and they weren't given a true voice. Like they weren't. A lot of it was sort of scrubbed. So it's like scrubbing the internet. Well, they scrubbed their works. They scrubbed their what they wrote. Even Mary Magdalene, a lot was scrubbed. Or if any, like Thomas or Philip, Gnostic Bibles wrote about the women. They got scrubbed. So they didn't want anything that opposed what their point of view and the power that they wanted. And as the church was, as Rome was falling, the church was still there. So it's basically, the church became the Roman church, the Roman Catholic Church. So the history, when you're going into the history of it, I find interesting. And who was in attendance to, the council of, whoops, let's see, into the council, and how much has, came from that. And a lot of our beliefs are coming from that as well within the Christian theme and Easter. Let me see if I can bring this all the way up. So yeah, because it had, if you guys want to know, anyways, it's one of those things that I go down in deep holes that I go down. So it's the religious leader and the imperial authorities that coming together. So it's a mixture of powers. So it is deeply religious and also politically powerful as well. So there's a lot of politics being played at that time. Religion, when they say separate, politics from religion, it's a very difficult thing because it's been in our history. Everything that the formulation of a lot of our constitutions, the formulation of countries were formed by religion or some form of belief system. And separating it is always a very difficult piece to do. And so the emperor Constantine I, he wasn't a bishop, he wasn't a priest, he was a Roman emperor. And newly converted ish to Christianity. He wanted to unify his empire and saw religion unity as a key, and presided over the council, but did not vote on theological matters. So he didn't vote on the theological matters. There was roughly 300 bishops, and one of the bishops was, which I found, and these guys were characters, real characters, that attended these talks, and they came from the Middle East, they came from North Africa, Asia Minor, Greece, and other parts of Europe. So there was a lot of theologians that came, and this was roughly through roughly 300 bishops came about. So you think about it, it's like, okay, these guys, from the apostles going out and doing their all of these different ideas were formulated from what they have heard, from what was written down. Nothing was written down until about 100 AD. So this is where, when we look at a lot of the bishops or the influential theologians at the time, were primarily religious men. No women were involved. So, women weren't invited to the party. So this is where many had suffered under earlier persecutions, prisoners, or tortured for their faith. So a lot of these bishops knew what it meant to be a Christian through their beliefs. There was Alexander Alexandria. He was boss and strong and opponent to Arianism, Eris. Anyways, there was a tiff, and the more I got into it, it's just like so much politics was going on at that time. I don't like you because of this. I don't like you because of this area. It was chaotic. It was crazy, right? We're thinking that, oh, the formation of this Christianity and bringing Christians all together was harmonious and loving, and bringing in all of these beautiful teachings, right? And it's one of those things that was I find it very interesting. I find it, interesting. So you have these guys. Some of the names I can't pronounce. Eusebius of Syria, he was a historian and a bishop, generally tried to keep the peace. There was a couple that had rifts between each other, but politics was in the room. And while most attendees, there were clergy or council was highly political, Constantine's presence made it clear that this wasn't just a theological debate, it was about stabilizing the empire. That was his interest. He wanted to make stabilization. He didn't really want to become a Christian. He still followed his religion, and he was oh was it he worshiped the sun god, the religion of the time in Rome. So he wasn't even a Christian, right? He worshipped was it Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. He didn't even get baptized until his death, as I said. So just to hedge his bets and to respect the game, just in case they were all right, he wanted to make sure he had a place in heaven. So Constantine wanted to unite a fractured um, country that was going in many different directions. And so this led to coming into agreement and coming into where to celebrate the resurrection. Some were still tethered to Jewish traditions and Passover calendars. Others wanted to set Christianity apart with its own identity. So Constantine gathered the early church powers and players to figure this all out. And that's what they did. And in doing so, really brought in a lot of ideas, a lot of theologians coming in, trying to unite it. So, what were they debating about? That's the whole thing. Hello. Some of the things that they were debating about: the nature of Christ. Was he divine, human, or both? Now, if you go into a lot of the Gnostics if you go into Thomas doesn't talk about resurrection. And I'll get into that later. So he doesn't talk about any of that. He talked about that you are divine, that God came in and that you are the divine one with the divine love of God, you are a God. Right? So it wasn't that you had to go out to a church, you had to go out anywhere, God was within you. Now that came from the Gnostic Thomas. Philip was a little bit more risque and talked about more of Jesus's relationship with Mary Magdalene and the connection that they had. Peter didn't like that. Peter was a little bit jealous, but I'm getting really far ahead of my story here. So, anyways, so we have the nature of Christ, specifically the teachings of Arius, Arius, who argued that Jesus was created by God and therefore not equal to God the Father. Result: the Nicene Creed was created affirming Jesus of the same substance. And if you ever go to a Protestant church, Anglican church, Catholic, and some other religions, they do the Nicene Creed. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. Blah, could go on. So that's the Nicene Creed that came from this time. So, in short, mostly religious leaders, bishops and theologians, politically charged environment. Constantine oversaw it, blending the church and the empire, and he set the stage for the Christian doctrine and the church-state relations for centuries to come. It's spicy, and it gets really spicy with all of these guys. This is where the Council of Nicene drama. It was like the Real Housewives of the early church, where all of them had a little bit of scandal on somebody else. And the council was called to settle the theological civil war brewing across the empire at the heart of it. And so we have Arius, Arius, Jesus, and this is what he said. He said, Jesus is the Son of God, but not eternal. He was created by God the Father. So there was a time when the Son did not exist. Jesus is divine-ish, but not equal to God the Father. This was a big problem for many leaders who believed in the full divinity of Christ. Of course, now you're going to get people saying, no, that's not true. And then the argument starts. Alexander of Alexandria and Athenus, and they said, nope, Jesus is begotten, not made. He is co-eternal with the Father. He is the same substance, harmonious as the Father, not just a similar one, harmonious. It's just one little. So the I different in Greek. So, but a huge theological rift. So you have these guys arguing over this, wanting to bring in a foundation to unite people. And so you got to say the council room was vibing. You have 300 plus gathering in where modern day Turkey is, right? In the palace of Nicaea. And many had scars from persecution under past emperors. Now they're here, right? Treated as VIPs by the emperor. So there's a lot of big mistrust there. You know, they're not trusting this dude who says, hey, come on in. I really want to unite everybody. And they're just like, nah, I don't know if I believe in you, guy. You know, what's your alternative motive to all of this, right? Your past predecessors actually ripped me apart. I got flogged, I got thrown in jail, my family, the whole bit. Now Eris presents his views, right? So we have, I'm getting a little hard. So the VIP, so we have Constantine shows up in his imperial robes, looking all like, ooh, look at me, I'm the GO, I'm the man, I got it all, I got the robes, I look fine. But also with a kind of awe for these men. He gives an opening speech, but the opening speech wasn't even written by him. It was written by a bishop about unity and peace. And the bishop probably rolled their eyes behind their incense because that followed was anything but peaceful, right? They're just like, yeah, whatever. You want peace. Okay. Really? Really? This is what you want? So the fight started. So there was a theologian street fight. Eris presents his views reportedly in a poetic version, and he was a good preacher and his message was catchy. He had the people, he could draw them in, right? He was the OG. He's like, I could draw you in. It's almost like a Drake fight with another rapper kind of thing. So opponents were horrified. Some sources a bit legendary. Nicholas of Myra, who was the original Santa Claus, was there. And he got so mad. Could you imagine Santa Claus getting mad? Well, he got mad and he slapped Eris across the face and he said, I ain't taking this bullshit. Eris supporters included Eusebius of Nicomedia, a political powerful bishop who played his cards carefully. So you had ones who were like fighting it out. You had ones that were just watching and holding their cards to their hand. This is crazy. So you think about everything that we've been taught or thought about Christianity, not taking anything away from Jesus, not taking anything away for what he did and what he stood for. But you have people that are fighting over this over 300 years later. Right? And you got to sort of take a stand back on a lot of the foundations of the church, even when you look into other religions and other churches and how they're formed. I mean, when it comes to the Muslims, I mean, it took 35 years of downloads of Muhammad to write their book. And he got his from going into a cave and getting the information from Archangel Gabriel. So that's the other crazy thing is like all of these guys all have the same archangels. Kind of interesting, I would say. So the outcome of the Nicene Creed, after intense debate and maneuvering, they produce the declaring that here is the creed, and the creed is we believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, begotten, not made, of one substance with the Father. So he is of one substance with the Father, and that was coming from there. Now, if you get other texts that come in, that there are, I mean, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, and their from their books, talking about this all, and it gets kind of crazy. We never get a time stamp date. Jesus was born on April 23rd, or Jesus died in such and such a date. We don't get a timestamp for any of that through all of this, which I think would have been really nice with all of that. But the plot twist, the council didn't end the controversy, not even close. Constantine died. The later emperors flip-flopped on supporting it, and um, Athanasius, who later became a saint and a church father, was exiled 5 times. He was like, "Nah, boy, you're out of here." He ended up becoming, hey, no, we'll bring him in because he did a lot of great things. Arius was briefly brought back and nearly reinstated before mysteriously dropping dead just before his reentry into communion. And some said intervention, God struck him down. Others whispered poison. I'm going with the poison. He was poisoned because he was outspoken, because he went out there and he wanted to bring the message. And some people like, I don't like your message, and I don't like the way that you're getting the power. It's, when you go through the history of any religion, you see that where the ego gets in and the ego wants to take over, and it comes forth, and there's just so much controversy through it all. I look at it as like, don't judge others, right? Don't judge others, with how they believe or how they practice. Some people, I mean, the thing about religion and the concept of religion, as Constantine wanted to do, was wanting to bring people together. He was just tired of fighting. I mean, and then his mom wanted to be a part of it, so he just sent her to the Holy Land to figure out, you go, mom, you go find the cross of Jesus. So we'll get into Helen later, but this is where it's like trying to figure it out. And there's the very thing about modern Christian clutches there, too, is wanting to call other people down, call other things down, new age deceptions, devil worship, you're a witch, you know, um, you know, that's the whole thing, is that they really want to keep that power, that stature of it all. And when you look into other biblical books, that's not really what it was all about. There's even something saying about Jesus of when he was younger, which is kind of interesting because because he did have power, um and how he utilized that power at a younger age. So I found that interesting. Anyways, a little bit aside. But the thing is that when we go back to it and when we start to look at it, and how astrology can come into it. I mean, because I find it where Neptune and Saturn meeting for the first time in 6,000 years, which is the time on Babylon, and a lot of things between, from Babylon until, what was it that was actually written down, that we have actual like manuscripts from, has been, I'd say, a good 1,000 years. And Babylon had the stargazers, and Constantine had priests casting charts and bishops debating moon phases, right? So the thing is that when they're doing all of this, they still brought in the astrology. They still brought in, the information of like, okay, this is when it was said. It was like when, they figure they don't know because it's hard to go back all the way that time with the stars and everything else, but they figured it was that the three wise men were following, Jupiter retrograde at the time, and the way Jupiter was so bright, and how they followed it. And um, the Magi's were studiers of the stars. So we have where they don't talk about them debating the moon phases. We don't have it that they're, talking about anything like that, or looking at the astrology as they're trying to figure out all of the theology of it all. And I find, that part very interesting, because it gets deleted out, just like the women get deleted out in it, of a lot of these women who came forward. And, where Mary Magdalene's, her lineage goes all the way back to Babylon. And the power and the women in her line go back to Babylon and the powers they had. So there is, and also portraying her as a prostitute, where you read in other biblical sense, in other ones, she wasn't a prostitute. She's the one who saw Jesus with great power. And she saw him, for who he was. And that's another factor of it as well. So we have all of these different layers, right, that are coming in. And why does this still matter, right? Setting a precedence for president for the church to define doctrine through collective meetings. It marked a fusion of church and empire, for better or for worse, and it solidified the idea of the Trinity and Christ's full divinity in mainstream Christianity. And that's where we are. So the origins, the Christianity movement, 313 AD, the Emperor Constantine issued, it's called an edict of Milan, making Christianity legal after Christians were persecuted. Christianity is in the spotlight. The church is gaining power. The power is happening. You enter Arius, who is smart, logical, great with the crowd. One of the things that he taught is that if the Father begat the Son, then he who was begotten had a beginning of existence. There was a time when he was not. This blew up the idea that Jesus was eternally divine. And Arius thought he was protecting God's oneness. Others thought he was dissing Jesus. So people didn't like everything that the guy was saying. No wonder he got poisoned, right? Or they felt that they were giving Jesus too much power. Either way, and this is a huge. You got to think of the Roman Empire at the time. It was huge, and this is the first worldwide council in history. The first time they got people from all over the world from that time together to discuss this, which is pretty cool in a lot of ways. I mean, it took a lot of time to get all these guys in there. They would be bringing in their entourage, coming to one place, coming to a place where many of them would have been persecuted or had family that were persecuted or friends that were persecuted, right? So we're bringing in a lot that were like controversial. The OG opponents. We got Alexander's fierce young deacon, and he'll become Arius's lifelong nemesis, which is Athanasius. We have historian bishops that are trying to keep the peace, that are just like, hey guys, cool down, don't be fighting, everything's going to be okay. Where you also have powerful supporters and very cozy with Constantine, who want to stay on his side just in case this guy's giving us a fast one. And of course you got Santa Claus there, the defender of the orthodoxy and the rumored slapper of heretics. So you find it, all of these characters would make a really good play. You get to the bottom of it, and the debates that they would have had would have been just like so interesting. But here we are, with when Constantine's own sister and son, like Artemis, dies, the political tide turns. This is where Euspus and of these are names that you just don't hear anymore. Nicomedia regains power of the court. Constantine starts to doubt the serenity of Arius's heresy. And this is all starting when Artemis dies. Artemis won't die, and Artemis's bizarre death, right? So all of this starts to rise up afterwards with this all. So the the craziness of it all and the foundation of the church really, gets you to really look at all of these things. And it was finally in the the more councils and the more conflict. So it was finally in 381 AD, decades later. The Armaism is still causing chaos. And there is a new emperor, Emperor Theodosius. The first is now in charge, and the Nicene Christians, he calls another council. And this time, the Nicene Creed is affirmed and expanded. So it wasn't until 381 that everything came together after Constantine, right? And the Holy Spirit is clearly declared divine. And the result in the final version of it all. So why does this matter? I mean, for people who are celebrating today, it defined who Jesus Christ is for Christianity: full God, fully human. It set the Trinitarian formula: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all equal, all eternal. Showed the first clear entanglement of the church and imperial power. Sparked centuries of councils, creeds, and schisms. Created an enduring blueprint for how the church defines orthodoxy and deals with heresy. So everything was defined. The way we live, the way our country is formed, all goes back to then. All goes back to then. Right? And the Council of Nicaea was like the Game of Thrones church edition. Right? Political theologians merged, allies shifted, powers was in the hands of the bishop, packed by emperors, right? We see it today. We're seeing it, we're seeing old men in the Middle East trying to hang on to their power and their beliefs for, because this is who we are, and try to bring their people together and, and keep that power. We see that patriotic power so defined in our everyday. We see it where, you had to have the Supreme Court in England define a woman, a naturally born woman is a woman. Really? Right? So that definition of trying to take away what women actually did and how much actual influence they really did, but it's not written. They didn't want to write that part, nor were they. A lot of women were. I don't think any women were invited to that. And it wasn't till later that you find within the birth doctrines in the church and state became bedfellows, right? The bishops became imperial power. This is where you got the Anglican Catholic Church, which is the Protestant Church or the Church of England, separated and started that separation. Martin Luther, separated from the church and started the Lutheran Church. But all of them kept the Nicene Creed. All of them can actually, with their priests and everything, go back all the way and trace their the priest genealogy all the way back to a lot of the apostles, which is quite interesting as well. But I digress. I find that this is interesting. It's also where a lot of things when it comes to history is really good to know. And it's also when you start looking at a lot of these men that were there, um, how they fought for their passion, how they fought for what they felt was true. Um, Athanasius of Alexandria, I find him interesting. He was born in 296 AD in Egypt, and he served as a secretary to the bishop of Alexander of Nyssa, and he became a bishop in 328, exiled 5 times over 45 years. I mean, he was a badass. Famously, he defied emperors, councils, and mobs, kind of like a badass. He really, he was fighting. He was fighting. He on his one of his things that he argued was that God became human in Christ so that humans could become divine. That's what he wrote. So God became man so that man might become God. Not literal gods, but united with the divine. They didn't like that. Deep, mystical, almost poetic, right? But they didn't like that of what he wrote. That was one of the things that they argued with him. So these are just a little bit of things that's what I was doing today. I was going down rabbit holes and going down these rabbit holes and finding them very interesting. I ended up with so many layers of mystics, martyrs, power hungry bishops, and holy fools, emperors, desert monks, creeds, chaos. All of this ended up all the way into going into the Gnostics and finding out more about the Gnostics and the Gnostic Bibles and like the Gospel of Thomas, a collective of 114 sayings, I think, attributed to Jesus. But he didn't talk about the birth, death, or resurrection. He's just speaking. He just has translation about Jesus speaking like a Zen master. And so there's that, which is I find interesting. Some saying in Thomas are older than those of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, some scholars. And they date back to 50 to 140 AD, meaning it's very early, maybe even contemporary with other gospels that were around at that. So I find that when you start looking into things and you start going into your own, say, belief system and your own spirituality, I find you really have to allow yourself to sit with it and not where we are so wanting to belong and we're so wanting to be a part of, which is part of human nature. We want to be connected with people. We want to be connected with others. It's important that we take time to look at why we want to belong, why we want to be a part of. And sometimes we're lonely. Sometimes it's just the fact that we just want to connect with others. Other times we just want to find other people who believe the same way we believe. Other times it might feel like, oh, well, I feel like I'm such an outcast of the community. I just want to be a part of the community in some way and be a part of that, where in essence it's for freedom, in essence of the freedom is not to belong, is to be who you are. That's the freedom. The freedom is to be the truth of who you are. And when I look at the life of Jesus, that's what he was. He was who he was. He might have been raised Jewish, right? But he stepped out from that. He stepped out of that form to be who he wanted to be, the person who we look at today. To look at a person who really stepped out and said, he didn't care if he sat with beggars. He didn't care if he sat with tax collectors. I mean, if he cared, if he wanted to belong, he wouldn't have done that. He would have stayed with the teachings of the Jewish tradition and just became, like a rabbi or a high teacher, and prophet, a prophet per se. So this is where I think today is a day of just looking at and honoring who he was and what he did and bringing people together and loving the woman at the well who was, when she said, I'm not married, and he goes, yeah, you're right. He's like, who? How do you know? It's understanding that he was just a person who was trying to spread some love around. And yeah, I think he got crucified. I really did. Now there's different versions to the resurrection. And those got smudged out because of Mary Magdalene and the visions that she had. And the thing is that for her, she didn't want to lead. She didn't want to confront. She just wanted everybody to know about the love and about how Jesus is still alive in each and every one of us in all that we do and all we say and all we be, and that we should step forward in doing that. We should step forward in being that love, step forward in being that kindness, and not trying to conform or be like whoever else. As I said to my son, you vote for whoever you want. That's the freedom. That's the freedom. However, this election turns out, that's the freedom. And however you want to look at it, right? It is what it is. It's the divine will. It's in a higher power than our own. And in allowing that. So this is where today I went down a deep dive and looking into a lot of different parts, of, even with the Gnostics, two Gnostic learning, Gospel of Thomas, um, and the material of the world as a trap or illusion. That's one of the things that he taught. Hidden knowledge as a path of salvation and the divine spark within. Orthodox Christianity emphasizes faith in Christ, grace, and resurrection and sacrament, not secret inner knowledge. Thomas spoke of a secret. You have knowledge within you. You hear that from in many different spiritual. Well, the knowledge is in you. You know it. You have it. Your intuition is there. If people really followed that truth and intuition, and the thing is, the intuition is going to lead you to somewhere better, somewhere higher. That's what it's going to do. It's not going to lead you to doing something destructive or mean. So when you believe in Christ crucified and risen, orthodoxy, Thomas says, know yourself. Know yourself. How powerful is that? Right? And Thomas contains no crucifixion, resurrection, or nor miracles. The canonical gospel centered the death and resurrection as the core of Christian salvation. Thomas centers around awakening and inner vision, awakening to God, awakening to that inner vision. So without the cross, the church leaders in the 2nd and 4th centuries considered it incomplete and theologically risky because they'd lose their power. People wouldn't be coming to them, right? So that caused more diversity and more persecution and taking away the power, taking that power away from the church, taking that power away from the bishops, and taking that power away from from others. Because he was saying that you got to awaken to your inner vision, got to awaken to who you are. And Thomas wasn't cited by major church fathers, in support of orthodoxy. It didn't circulate in many religions as because of the big four, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. The canon decisions emphasized texts on the apostolic authorities and why Jews. So Thomas was too fringe, too different, too eccentric. So when you are too fringe, when you are too eccentric, people aren't going to like you because you're not fitting in. You're going to the beat of your own drum. You're going to your ownness, your own individuality. And that's where the freedom is. That's where the freedom is. And that's where people can't get it. A lot of people ask me, why didn't you join certain groups, like certain pagan groups? I don't want to join them. Because the thing is that when you get into those groups and when you get into these different organizations, there is conformity and they want a certain structure and they want you to be a certain way. And when you question somebody too much, they don't like that. They don't like it when you question that. And I find questioning is so important because it's going to find out for truth for you. So many scholars and mystics love Thomas. Some believe it preserves an earlier oral tradition of Jesus. Others see it as a spiritual gospel, offering not theology, but transformation. Thomas doesn't contradict Jesus. It offers a different lens. And that's the whole thing, is that when we can step back and look at a different lens, follow the rules more, it's like less follow the rules, more awaken the light within. The more we awaken the light within, and that's partially that is where we are in this new age that we are entering in. We're entering into this new age. Christianity was the Piscean age, which was huge. It was like, how many years? 2,000 some odd, 2,100 and some odd years. And now we're entering into the Aquarius age. which is looking at things in a new way. That, I mean, the Aquarius age is bringing in new ideas, new thought form. It brings in new engineering. It brings in aliens, alien life forces, alien, things like that. Um, so this is where, when you look at things, you got to really take a step back. And, where a lot of people with what he wrote, I mean, even with what the Leo King wrote, I mean, a lot of people got pissed off at him, but that's fine. But I think he was writing from a place that is, plus he's a Leo, so Leos sometimes say things and they get themselves in fucking shit because they just like, bleh. I mean, you think Geminis are bad? Leos come in with it, but they come in with it from a place where it's like really heart centered, and it can sound more egotistical than a Gemini because they're fixed on it. So it's quite interesting. And yeah, it's yeah, anyways. So this is where you look at the politics, you look how the soup of superstition, the politics, the pagan rituals, the spiritual theater came the structure of Christianity, and this combination of all of it. And where then again, in order for them to keep that power, they will turn around and say others are heretics. We're in the age of heretics too, where people are going to be called out as being heretics. And so we're going to have many that are going to be angry about it, that won't like that. So they don't like the astrologers. Our last governor general said astrology was false. It wasn't real, right? And I'm just like, okay, a governor general, which is basically the voice of the king. The king has a freaking astrologer. They do. They've all had it. I mean, Queen Elizabeth, she was the first. She was the one who really debated a lot of astrology and had astrologers come in. This is where a lot of, when it comes to a lot of things that Nostradamus wrote, he had to write it in script. And the reason why he had to write it in script, because a lot of the power of B at that time did not like what he was writing because of what he was finding out within the stars, right? It scared them. Um, you know, so I mean, that's another little thing that we could go down as well. But my final thought, the Gospel of Thomas was rejected because it lacked Jesus. It wasn't rejected because it lacked Jesus. It was rejected because it presented Jesus who couldn't be controlled. Think of that. They wanted him to be controlled, right? So it was a banned book. And looking at these, of it being banned or buried or burned. So a lot of these things, like even the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, when they found um, her Gospels, the first, I think like the first several pages are gone. They're ripped out, and they're just like, okay, that's weird. Why, So, and the other thing is that where for her, she said, Jesus says to her, there is no sin if it is you who make sin exist. That's an interesting one. And the Savior and Mary to the disciples, this is what it was written. The Savior said, all nature, all formation, all creatures exist in and with each other, and they will be resolved again into their own roots. So, oh, which movie did you watch? It's got a few. But that's the whole, with Mary Magdalene, a leader, an interpreter of Jesus's true message, the Gnostic elements. But going back to today and the celebration of Easter, I think it is a great time to celebrate. It is a great time in Christianity for people to gather and to look at somebody who came and who proclaimed a message of love, right? And coming into that message of love. Yeah, he did a movie many years ago when it was in Jesus's original language. He's done a few movies about Jesus and the Passion of Christ, Mel Gibson, and he gets flack for it. So, for what he has done, but this is where I feel spirituality can unfold for us, and entering into that place, that divine will. That's what I find this year is. This is a year of forgiveness too. That a new world, a new spirit, a new identity, I'm going to call it an identity, a spirituality is being formed. And that's why so much of the church and a lot of Christian groups are fighting to keep control, are fighting to keep their identity, because it doesn't matter whether it's the Jewish tradition, whether it's Christianity or the Muslims. They're trying to keep their identity, and their identity is collapsing. Because when you go back to a lot of, even the Gnostic Bibles, and they're talking to you that divinity is within you and you are divine. And if you come into the world with that divineness, and you come in with that world, I mean, in a true world of love, then you come into it with non-judgment and allowing yourself to be free without having to feel like you have to be accepted by one group or another group. That you are who you are and you're allowed to be who you are. But we were given an ego, and that ego is something that we are here to deal with and to understand and to really work with. And if we work with that ego and we get to an understanding of that ego, then we can be led by the soul. But to be led by the soul, if we are allowing ourselves to be led by the soul, that means we are coming into a place that we are who we want, who we need to be. We're coming into a place of love, and we're coming to a place where that I am allowing my soul to lead. And that's where people will call you a heretic. That's where people will call you, egotistical, false. But then you're not identifying with any of that. You're only identifying with the truth of that, of the divine and the divine will, and following that of the divine. Pretty cool. And I feel that's what Easter needs to be. Easter needs to be that time of connection, of gathering with one another, and allowing for each of that divinity, that divineness, that beauty to shine through each and every one of us, and have respect for those who are still believing in that, in that truth. People, I mean, with Saturn and Pisces, this is, Saturn and Pisces is where you're going to see more people go to Christianity than any other time. 17,300 Catholics were baptized in France yesterday. That was the largest amount they've ever had. More Christians and more people being baptized in the church than ever before. People are searching. They're wanting to belong. They're wanting that belongingness, because for so long they haven't been able to belong to anything. And they felt left out. Yeah, it was going on in China too. I heard in Tenement Square as well. I would, the thing is, yeah. Because of social media and stuff like that, the Chinese government, it'll be interesting to see what happens to the people afterwards. That's all I got to say to that one. Because people disappear very easily in China, even though they want to come out and say they're modern, they're this and they're that. The thing is when you, again, there's that we're going back to the Council of Nissan. When you have all these political guys that want to hang on to power, right? Want to hang on to power. And it's very political. It's political. The church is political. Religion is political, and how we look at, a lot of countries, as I said before, were built on Christianity. They're built on Islam, or they're built on, you have India, it's built on Hinduism, and it's built on the Sikhs, and it's built on Muslims. So you have that, that's what they're built on. And it doesn't separate their belief system doesn't separate from church and state. So even though the United States, it's supposed to be a republic, it's not supposed to have anything to do with God, but in God we trust, but it didn't state any religion. But they were the United States was founded on Masons. There are Masons who founded it. So, and if you enter into a Mason hall, when you enter it and when the men enter the Mason hall, that you enter it in the belief of God, but not your religion, which is interesting. So, which I find very interesting. Compilation of the Pope with Weinstein, Oprah, and Obama, and the rest of them. Of Weinstein, Oprah. Well, all of them have seen the Pope. Weinstein's Jewish. So that's interesting. Oprah, I know, has seen the Pope. I mean, a lot of people can go and see the Pope. I mean, you can get you can ask for an invitation to see the Pope, definitely. I know Weinstein's Jewish. His case is coming up because of a lot of facts that are coming up about his case. And the things that were a part of the case they're finding were falsified. So I find that's interesting too. Not saying like Weinstein was a gross man, very gross man, but yeah. But a lot of people can get see the Pope. He's, you know, there's a lot there that goes on with that too, and the Pope too. That's a whole nother area. But today, come into your peace, come into your love, come into a place of where you can just celebrate you, where you can celebrate your love, and you can celebrate that beauty of your individuality, your uniqueness. And yeah. And if you want to join me, May 1st, I start the journaling club, and I am so excited about that because it's bringing in creativity. I'm bringing in magical and mysticism and all of that beautiful things to do with journaling. So it's not just giving you a journaling prompt and saying, "Hey, what did you think today?" No, we're going to be going into some deeper aspects even within the first week. I call it the Journey Club of Journaling. That's what it is. So for 31 days, the Journey Club of Journaling. So, and bringing in new aspects of journaling and allowing you to explore different parts of yourself in that. And it's not just writing. It's not just writing. It's getting creative. So on that point, I want you all to have a very happy Easter. Eat lots of chocolate, enjoy the foods, enjoy the harmony, enjoy the peace, enjoy all what you do and say and be. And if you're wanting to join the journey of journaling, the journaling journey for May 1st, get a hold of me. It's $50, 31 days. It's going to be fantastic. Have a blessed one. We'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye. Probably tomorrow.